A warm welcome, everybody, to this episode on Western political thought. This particular episode focuses on reading a very unique text of a famous British political theorist of the 19th century. All of you are familiar with his name, that is John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill's work, it is known as Considerations on Representative Government, which he published in the year 1861, is considered as one of the leading texts of not only 19th century British political thought, but it is a text which has major relevance in today's world, especially when we are concerned with deepening modern democracy. It is a book, and it requires a little bit of explanation that why we are very specifically focusing on the reading of this text, that is Considerations on Representative Government, sometimes popularly known simply as Representative Government. John Stuart Mill wrote so many books. Some of his very famous works are, say, On Liberty, published in 1859, then say Utilitarianism, published in 1861, and the same year, 1861, this book, Considerations on Representative Government, this was also published. But why very specifically focus on this book? We very specifically focus on this book for two important reasons. One reason is that John Stuart Mill in this book, Representative Government, addresses a question which is of lasting relevance. That is, what kind of government is, or one can put it like this, what kind of government do we really deserve? What kind of government should we really think of if we have to really do good to our people? That is, if we want to democratize our society, what kind of government is most appropriate for us? This is, of course, you can understand, a very, very big and relevant question today. So this is one explanation of why we are taking up this particular text for today's discussion. The other thing is, and that is very, very unique, very, very specific, so far as John Stuart Mill is concerned. As we proceed, we will see that in this book, John Stuart Mill has tried to combine or has tried to reconcile two rather opposite things. That is, if I put it very simply, then it can be put like this: quantity and quality. That is, quantitative aspect of democracy and qualitative aspect of democracy. So, whether this reconciliation is possible, or whether this kind of reconciliation one can imagine, whether it is feasible, well, this is something which we come across in this book. Whether John Stuart Mill succeeded in reconciling these two elements, or whether he failed, that of course we have to discuss, that of course we have to consider at the end of this lecture. So, keeping these two explanations in mind, why we are studying this particular text, let us take up one central question which underlies John Stuart Mill's analysis or John Stuart Mill's understanding of this text. That is, John Stuart Mill actually is concerned with a very big question, a very, I would say, very, very important question. The question is that why should people think of a good government? Because people, after all, if they have to live peacefully, if they have to live in a democratic society, they of course cannot ignore the importance of living under a good government. But the point is that good government, if it has got to be ensured, then certain conditions have to be fulfilled. The first condition is that people must want, that they really require a good government. That is, people must be willing to have a good government. if they don't will a good government, if they do not want a good government, then the question of discussing the necessity of a good government just is useless. This is the first consideration. The second consideration is that merely willing a good government is not enough. Just because you want a good government, that is not enough. You must also preserve, you must have the energy, you must have that kind of, say, drive that you want to preserve that good government. And the third point is that you must defend your government. That is, if there is a threat to your government, then there must be willingness on the part of the people to defend that government. So you must want a good government, you must preserve the good government, and you must defend the good government. If these three factors are there, then you can think of, well, discussing the importance of necessity of a good government. Now, John Stuart Mill very uncompromisingly put forward one model, and he believed that that was the best form of government which is feasible, which is really, it's a kind of government which can be realized in practice. Now, what is that kind of government? John Stuart Mill believed in the necessity and importance and feasibility of what we call representative government today. Representative democracy. All of us say, we Indians, for example, we are already quite familiar with, we are quite conversant with representative democracy. Since our independence, we have been living through this representative model of Indian democracy, and our parliamentary democracy essentially is based on the model of representative democracy. So John Stuart Mill believed in the ideal of representative democracy. And John Stuart Mill also did not agree with another kind of model which was quite popular in John Stuart Mill's times, that it's direct democracy. Direct democracy, perhaps all of you know, was a kind of model which was originally practiced in ancient Greece. Then it was picked up by Rousseau also, and some other commentators later. John Stuart Mill believed that direct democracy, of course, is a form of democracy, but it is a kind of democracy which ultimately sacrifices the interests of the individual. The individual is sacrificed at the altar of the collective. As you know, Rousseau's general will, well, one of the main allegations against Rousseau's general will is this: the individual voice, individual freedom, the voice of the minority, that is ultimately sacrificed at the altar of the collective. So John Stuart Mill, himself a Democrat who believed in preservation of democratic values, who believed in individual freedom, well, for John Stuart Mill, direct democracy was not acceptable. So he believed in, he very strongly espoused, he very strongly defended the cause of representative democracy. But while talking of representative democracy, well, as the point with which I started the discussion today, for John Stuart Mill, there was one problem. He was quite aware of this problem, and he tried to address this problem in his work, Representative Democracy. So, in representative democracy, in this work, John Stuart Mill addressed this question in terms of, or with reference to, two contradictory elements underlying the functioning of, working of, the practice of representative democracy. So what are these two contradictory elements? One element is the element of participation. John Stuart Mill very strongly believed in participatory democracy. That is, people from all walks of life, they should have the opportunity, they should have the right, they should have the freedom to participate in the democratic process. To be more precise, he believed in extension of suffrage to all sections of society, which included working class, which included women, and only by extending franchise, you can expand the frontiers of democracy. So, thereby, if you extend suffrage, if you give more and more voting rights to different sections of society, you expand the framework of democracy. And thereby you deepen, you widen, you enrich the working of representative democracy. That is one aspect. Because you are ensuring, you are encouraging, you are deepening participation. So participation is one aspect. More and more people are coming and joining the democratic process. So on this question, John Stuart Mill is absolutely uncompromising. But then he addresses another question. And that leads to the problem. That leads to the kind of, say, focus on this contradiction between two elements. While John Stuart Mill is talking of expanding democracy, expanding the frontiers of democracy, he also, at the same time, also cautions us that in the name of majority participation, in the name of more and more expansion of the frontiers of democracy, is it not a fact that the voice of not only the minority, but the voice of the enlightened minority, the voice of those who speak for equality, the voice of those who think differently from the rest of society, but who can guide the society, who can lead the society, who are the future leaders of society, that is the cause of competence, the cause of efficiency, the cause of quality, is it not threatened by the mediocrity, that is those who are mediocre elements, those who constitute the mediocre majority? This mediocre majority, or this vast masses who have joined the democratic process, well, do they not constitute a threat to the question of quality? This is John Stuart Mill's abiding concern throughout his life. That is it not a fact that in the name of majority voice, in the name of democracy, the voice of the majority will stifle the voice of the minority? So, what to do about that? This is John Stuart Mill's central concern. And John Stuart Mill, for that, well, gives us certain prescriptions which are rather debatable. So, John Stuart Mill, on one level, he is focusing on importance of participation, importance of deepening democracy, importance of wider engagement of more and more sections of society, including working class, including women, etc. At the same time, he is also concerned with another question which disturbs him, which perturbs him, that is the question relating to the voice of the enlightened sections, the voice of the quality. That is, whether the voice of the majority is not posing a threat to the voice of the minority, whether the voice of the minority is being eclipsed by the voice of the majority. Now, if that be so, then obviously John Stuart Mill has got certain prescriptions. That is, how to stop it, how to arrest it. And John Stuart Mill indeed has provided us with certain prescriptions, with certain, say, solutions, which of course have led to controversies also. Let me very briefly summarize some of his prescriptions. The first thing, and he makes it unambiguously clear, that while you talk about deepening the representation of different sections of society in Parliament, well, that is most welcome, and John Stuart Mill has no problems with that. But then he cautions us that while you deepen the cause of participation, while you deepen democracy in Parliament, so far as legislation is concerned, legislation is something that demands competence, that demands expertise. So legislation cannot be left to those who just occupy parliament. Legislation should be left to experts, to an expert body, to competent people. This is issue number one. Issue number two, or one can say prescription number one or prescription number two, if this is his one prescription. The other prescription is that he believes that in order to ensure, in order to safeguard quality, and thereby in order to arrest this mechanical march of the teeming millions, just that is, if we have to stop the idea of, say, defending democracy simply in terms of quantitative participation of the masses, then you require, that is, if you have to ensure quality in the functioning of democracy, then you require proportional representation, that is, voting through a system of proportional representation, so that each and every segment of society is represented. This is his second prescription. His third prescription is plural voting, that is, those who are competent, those who are efficient, those who are above average, well, they should have more than one vote. Of course, it's a very, very debatable, controversial question, but this is how John Stuart Mill tried to endorse his own viewpoint. And the fourth thing is that if we have to ensure, if we have to defend quality, then we also should think in terms of, say, if we have to deepen the quality of democracy, if we have to deepen competence, if we have to ensure quality, then we have to think in terms of making a distinction between, say, two kinds of action. Actually, this is a proposition which John Stuart Mill does not put forward in his work, Representative Government. This actually is a kind of argument. It's a very important, very interesting philosophical argument which is there in John Stuart Mill on liberty. But I am relating that argument to the text Representative Government. John Stuart Mill actually believed in a kind of distinction between two types of action. One action he calls self-regarding action. The other kind of action he believed in other-regarding action. So two types of action, self-regarding and other-regarding. And he made a fundamental distinction between these two types of action. By self-regarding action, he meant those activities, those actions, those programs which concern an individual to the exclusion of everything else. That is, I am indulging in an action, I am indulging in an activity which exclusively concerns me and which does not have impact on society as such, which does not affect others. And I should be absolutely free in that domain. That is, I should be left free in my activity so far as this particular domain is concerned. And John Stuart Mill very strongly emphasized the importance of self-regarding action. It is this kind of action which actually John Stuart Mill associates with the issue of quality. That is, so far as an individual is concerned, if my action does not adversely affect others, if my action, my activity does not adversely affect society, then I am sovereign, I am free in my domain. And I should be let free to promote my own self. John Stuart Mill, as I said, associated this kind of action with quality. Whereas other regarding action are those actions which primarily concern the actions, program, policies of government which are concerned with society, which are concerned with others, and that is why it is called other regarding actions. These other regarding actions, they focus on the quantitative aspect of representative democracy. So self-regarding action, that focuses on the qualitative aspect, the issue of competence, whereas other regarding action, they are focusing on, or they have their focus on government policies, the quantitative aspect, the broad functioning of democracy, etc. So for John Stuart Mill, what actually happens so far as the functioning of representative democracy is concerned is that he does not believe in the fact that simply by deepening, although he himself is prescribing it, and he very strongly endorses this one, yes, there should be deepening of democracy, deepening of participation. But at the same time, he also is afraid, he's he's quite skeptical, quite strongly skeptical of the point that this intervention of the masses, this growing role of the masses in the functioning of modern democracy, in the functioning of representative democracy, well, will perhaps pose a threat to the issue of quality. And therefore, the domain of self-regarding action, that has to be deepened, that has to be, although please remember, this is not exactly how John Stuart Mill puts it in his work, Representative Government. This is an argument which one finds in his work on liberty, published in 1859, just 2 years before he wrote his book, Representative Government. Therefore, John Stuart Mill is frantically trying to reconcile these 2 points, that is quantity and quality, and ultimately he believes, at least the kind of temperament that he has, that explains that John Stuart Mill ultimately, although he defends the cause of representative democracy, he defends the cause of active participation, he defends the cause of democratization of society, but he ultimately stands for quality. That is, he ultimately stands for the defense or domain of self-regarding action. If this be the understanding of John Stuart Mill, so far as the text representative democracy is concerned, then obviously the question that arises is this, that what kind of impression we get of John Stuart Mill? Is he a true democrat? Although he talks about representative democracy, does he believe in democracy? If we look at the text, representative government, very carefully, then we find that John Stuart Mill, while he talks of deepening participatory democracy, he is also extremely cautious in regard to the question how far democracy should be extended. On one level, it's very interesting and it's very paradoxical. On one level, he defends the cause of extension of franchise, as I've already pointed out. Extension of franchise, extension of suffrage to women, to working class. But then finally, at one point, he also makes a couple of very interesting prescriptions. That is, you should restrict democracy. You should put a leash on democracy. And he very specifically categorizes at least 2 sections of society who should not be given the right to suffrage. One of them is the illiterates. Those who are illiterates, they should not be allowed the right to vote. And the others, those who do not pay taxes, they also should not be allowed the right to vote. Finally, what we can conclude from the discussion that we had on representative democracy is, I think this is the impression that we get, is that John Stuart Mill, although he believes in and he endorses and he defends the cause of representative democracy, ultimately he remains an elitist. Elitist in the sense that he is skeptical of, say, giving the right to vote to those who are illiterates. He believes, and very strongly believes, that ultimately those who are educated, who are sophisticated, who are literate, those who are quote-unquote competent, efficient, and those who belong to the minority, and above the rest, above the average, only those people, this small elitist group of people, well, they only can be given the charge, they only can be given the responsibility of administrating truly and properly the cause of, and thereby endorsing, defending and deepening the idea of representative democracy. Thank you.